Hello, welcome to the Step Stories podcast. If you're a first time listener, we've got a fun and important episode for you today. I'm your host, Robin Bruener, and I'm super excited about my guest. Her name is Karis Nafte, and she's joining me from South Africa. Hi, Karis.
Hello, Robin.
Hi. I'm so glad you're here. It's great to have you. And before I start talking about Karis, I want to frame what today's interview is about. And it's about animals and pets. And I want to start by saying I'm a huge animal lover, particularly of dogs. And ironically, my 3-year-old golden retriever, Luna, is usually always sitting by my side when I do the podcast, except for today she's not here. She's in the other room. So anyway, my producer's always trying to get me to make her part of the show because sometimes she likes to bark a little and I try to cut that out. But anyway, she's my sidekick and I love having her. And I'm saying all this because Karis is an expert on pets and known internationally for her mediation efforts in support of the animals, particularly in divorces and remarriages. And she's written a book called Who Keeps the Dog? Navigating Pet Custody During Divorce. It's a fabulous title. I love that. And she's also recently spoken to the American Bar Association about this subject. So Karis, hi, tell us about you. Let's start with where you're from, how you ended up in South Africa. Love to hear it.
Thanks, Robin. So it's an interesting story, I'm sure it would be to anyone listening. I was born in Oregon. I grew up in Portland, and that's where I started my career working as a dog trainer and then a dog behaviorist. So I've been working with dogs since the mid-90s, and I was really lucky through, life happens and the events of life unfold, and I came to South Africa on vacation in 2005. And I just fell in love with this place. And so I ended up staying here and being really lucky to work with all the fantastic animals here. So I've worked with some amazing wild animals on movie sets, which is one of the cool parts of my job, cool chapters of my life. But mostly what I've done is worked with dogs. And when I say worked with dogs, what I mean is I have helped families who are struggling with their dogs. And the struggle can be anything from very adorable struggles, like they've got a new puppy and they don't know how to stop the puppy chewing on their shoes, to very, very scary struggles, like, is this dog too dangerous? It just bit a child, or is maybe the dog killed the cat, and kind of everything in between. A lot of dogs who have major anxiety issues. Kind of everything you can imagine a dog doing, I've probably seen it in the last 30 years working with animals. So based on that background of extensive work with families and dogs, I've seen many thousands of dogs, and with that is many thousands of families that are connected to the animal. Done a lot of work in rescue and all kinds of things. And I started noticing about 10 years ago, probably now, a little longer, a trend where people were calling me for help with their dogs because the dog was having some kind of behavioral issue. And the reason they were having the behavioral issue was that the divorce agreement, or what was happening with the dog post-divorce was stressing the dog out. And people weren't quite aware of it, or maybe they didn't know what to do about it. And so myself, when I grew up, just a cute backstory is that my mom was a divorce mediator. So I grew up in a house of divorce mediation being a big topic, and how to get through divorce as gently as possible, which isn't always that easy. So I realized that there was a big gap in the world of pet custody, in that people love their animals, even divorce professionals who love animals, still didn't know what the right thing to do was. What do you actually do after a divorce? How do you, should you share the dog? Should you not? What do you do if there's 2 dogs? What do you do about cats? So I became a mediator myself, and now this is what I do full time. I just work in this space, and I either help people decide about what to do with their animals, or I help after the divorce, helping the family adjust. So rather than making decisions about custody with the family, I just help come up with, routines and behavior plans so that whether it's the dog adjusting to new children in the family, in the case of us, step families, or saying goodbye to some family members, which sometimes happens, and that whole universe is what I do. And I have a step family of my own. I'm a stepmother, and my daughter has a stepfather. So this is something I know intimately myself, and I'm really excited to share, yeah, with your listeners some tips for people who are going through this.
This is amazing. I think you told me you have seen more than 20,000 dogs over the years of doing this, right? Which is
Yeah,
incredible.
it's
Um,
it's incredible. Yeah.
and I wanted to just say the way I found Karis was I had a memory of something that happened to me as a little girl and a stepdaughter, and the light bulb went off, and I thought this must happen so much. My own little miniature dachshund died about 30 days after my mother died when I was 10, and I think just the shock of my mother dying and then my dog dying got absorbed into that. And I quickly had another stepmother, and we asked her, can we get another dog? And she promptly said, no, I don't ever want to have a dog. And boy, it led to a lot of emotions. And I thought, my gosh, this must happen a lot on every angle. Maybe a step parent comes in and brings a pet, and that pet doesn't get along with an existing pet or with a child who's afraid of animals. So anyway, that's what led me to seek out Karis, and I know you have stories about these things, and I don't know if you'd like to share some, but you shared with me earlier when we spoke that you've dealt with this a lot. So I'd love to have you share some thoughts and any interesting stories that you've come across.
I think the most interesting universal, let's say, tip I can offer people, or maybe a little bit of insight that will help if you are navigating mixing a family together with animals. And that is, animals are a lot simpler than we think they are. So, especially when it comes to dogs, but cats also, I often hear people um, sort of attributing human emotions and human motivations to a dog's behavior. Like simple things like, um, the dog chewed up my shoe because you don't like me, or because the dog doesn't like me. So, that like, let's take that as an example. That's one of the most common things that people will attribute to their own emotion, but that is not actually the animals. And so the first thing that people need to understand is that animals are not an extension of us. So if there is tension, if maybe, let's say you're having a personal struggle with someone in the family, you think they don't like you, maybe you don't like them, or you're trying to just make it work. You're trying to establish a relationship. It's very easy to talk about, well, the dog doesn't like me, rather than say, I don't think that person likes me very much. And that gets dogs into a lot of trouble. And when I say trouble, I just mean a lot of stuff that's, got nothing to do with the dog. But we sort of channel our emotions through them in a way that isn't fair. So the first thing is, dogs are simpler than we think they are. So are cats. If the dogs are doing things that you don't like, or that we would say are like bad behavior, whatever that is, and usually bad behavior in dogs is just normal behavior happening in the wrong context. Okay. Dogs chewing on something is not bad. It might be bad if they're chewing on your new trainers, but it's not bad if they're chewing on a bone. So if we can take that little piece of it out of our assumptions, that helps a great deal. So I do a lot of work where people have blended families together. And one of the common challenges is, let's say there's two families or two people and there's two dogs. How can we get those dogs to live together? How can they be happy? And not all dogs are used to sharing their house with another dog. So the most successful families plan for this and work very quietly and very carefully to get the dogs to get along with each other. So I had one family who had two very large bull mastiff dogs. Okay. So bull mastiffs, for anyone who doesn't know, They weigh about 100 pounds normally. They're huge, jowly, big dogs, very big, intense dogs. Generally very friendly, but they're very powerful. They're very strong. And this family knew that they were going to be moving in with each other in several months, and that they had these two dogs. That was really important for the family that the dogs got along well and that they were safe with each other. And so what
Hey,
I did
wait,
was,
I'm going to interrupt you really quick.
yeah,
Each family had a bull mastiff, or one family had two?
sorry. So there were two people who were going to be
Yeah.
moving in together. So two sides.
Yeah.
So there was a relationship, and they both
Yeah.
had the same breed of dog, which was great.
Okay.
And
Okay.
they were I'm being vague because I'm but that's
Yeah,
what's
of
happening. Let me be
course.
more clear. So there were two people in a relationship. They each had the same breed of dog, which happened to be a bull mastiff, which was a very
Mhm.
cute origin story for them that they both liked the same breed of dog. But they were dating, they had a long distance relationship. They knew they were gonna move in with each other. They had these 2 dogs. They were committed. They were gonna bring the children together. They both people had teenagers that were gonna all be living in the same house. So we had teenagers, 2 parents, and 2 bull mastiffs who were going to be sharing the same house. So I worked with this family literally for months, and it was actually such a beautiful process to get these dogs used to each other. So we started doing things like, for example, I had the dogs each sleep on a blanket, and then we wrapped the blanket up in plastic and FedExed it to the other house. So the dog could start to get used to the smell of
Ah.
the other dog, because that's one of the first tools that dogs have to get used to each other. So we scent swapped once a week for quite a long time so that the dogs were used to the smell.
Mm.
And then when it was time for the one half of the new family to move to where this bull mastiff was, they first stayed in a hotel so that we didn't rush the dogs together too fast. Often, what happens when people are literally bringing two dogs together, they rush it and they assume it's going to be fine, and then it often isn't immediately, and it's very hard to redo a first impression. So this family was very smart. They first went to a hotel, and then we started walking the dogs together. And it really took about 2 weeks of very slow, mindful integration. And now these two dogs are just the best of friends, and it's absolutely adorable. If we had rushed it, if they had just arrived and moved the dogs in with each other, it probably wouldn't have gone so well. I imagine they would have been a bit aggressive with each other. It would have been very hard uh, to fix and make it a harmonious household. So smart integration really keeps the dog in mind, and goes nice and slow. And it's often helpful to get professional advice if people need it, if they're not sure, like maybe they have a dog who's a bit aggressive or isn't used to sharing their space with another dog. So walking together, if you are going to introduce a dog into a house, two dogs into a household, it might not be as extreme as my two big power breed clients, but walking them together first regularly is the best way for them to become friends before they come into a house together. And then we can also talk about children. Should I talk about little kids and dogs? Because that's also a biggie.
Yes, and I was thinking as I was listening to you and this integration with the 2 dogs. I mean, in a way, on the one hand, you're saying, dogs are not children. They're not people. You treat them differently. But there's some bits of what you said that I think also work with a family, with children to get to know each other, finding ways to do it slowly and gently and not pushing it. And don't they do that also with a new baby coming into a household with a dog, doing the scent thing where you're bringing the babies? Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. The best way for dogs to meet newborns first is by their scent. So
Hmm.
if you have the baby in a hospital, it's great to bring home something like a blanket or a little t-shirt, even a wet diaper that the baby has
Mm.
peed in. Honestly, because that dogs get a lot of their information through those kind of smells. So it's good to
Hmm.
bring those things home first. Let the dog smell it and get a sense of this new little being that's about to arrive. And then when you actually bring the baby physically into your house, you also need to let the dog smell the baby. Um, but my biggest tip when you're bringing a baby home, um, is not to make a big deal of introducing the dog to a baby. Unfortunately, like a lot of people do on social media, where it's like, wow, we're introducing the dog to a baby. Because if you bring the baby home, which is of course being held, and you make a big deal and show it to the dog will probably think you've brought it a toy. Because that's also what you do if you bring them a cool toy from the pet shop. It's like, oh, wow, I'm holding this thing and I'm going to show it to you. And we're all excited. And it gets the dog all revved up. And what we really want from a baby is boredom. That's the best result, is that the dog's not
Mhm.
that interested. Because babies don't do anything, they're cute, but they don't move. They just make noise. We don't actually want the dogs to be that excited or interested. So my advice is come home, put the baby on a counter, let the dog smell it, but make it a bit of a non-event rather than introducing it like you would to a puppy or to a child. And obviously, just as a sort of a safety precaution, if you have any worry about your dog and the baby, do get qualified professional help in to help you, because obviously you have to be safe. But generally, it's more often okay than it's not, as long as people are really sensible about what they're doing.
I agree with that. I do know, and I'm not going to go into the story because it's a pretty bad one, but something happened to a baby with a dog who was supposedly, had never done anything in its life, and then it did, and it was so you can't leave a baby alone with a dog, no matter
Oh, yeah.
how you think the dog is, and you just don't know. As you said, they're another breed. I mean, they're not human beings. So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Not being an expert, just having
Yes.
experienced it.
Absolutely agree with you. Would never ever leave a baby alone with a dog, no matter
Yeah.
regardless of the breed. Absolutely. Yeah.
What were you going to share on that subject, though, about children and dogs? Not babies, but what you were going to share some stories about that, because I know you've experienced so many different things. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
So some I had another client who it was a two people who moved in with each other. And she had a 6-year-old son, and this little boy was on the autism spectrum. He had quite a lot of sensory challenges. And this was a kind of a heartbreaking story, in that the man that she was moving in with, he had a little Staffordshire Terrier, and they're little tough little dogs. They look like little pit bulls. They're tiny little dogs, and they're very, very mouthy. So these dogs generally like to play with their teeth. It doesn't mean they're aggressive. They just use their mouth a lot. And um, this was a real challenge for this little boy who wasn't used to pets, and he wasn't used to, this dog who really wanted to play with his mouth.
Mm,
And so I did quite a few sessions with the family to see what was possible about helping this little boy and this little dog live together. And in the end, what happened was that we actually found a new home for the dog, because
mm,
it was not a resolvable issue. It was a matter of, we didn't want to keep um, the dog and the little boy fenced off from each other. It was really stressing this child out to have this small animal in the house that was so, kind of intense and doing things he couldn't handle. And I had long talks with the mother and with her new partner. Um, and they just sort of came to the realization that for a happy household, it wasn't going to work. And we found the most wonderful home for his dog. It was someone else who'd had the breed before, who was prepared to, give him the best home possible. And so some people would say, I have this conversation often where people say, no, I can never, never give my dog away or never rehome my dog. And I really disagree with that statement, because sometimes it is really the right choice. Every situation is different, and not every dog is suitable in every situation or every household. And for this particular family, the relationship was really important to them. And it was really important to this man that this boy also formed a relationship with him. And what was happening is that they were living separate lives, because the dad, the man in this situation, was kind of hanging out with his dog, and the mom was hanging out with her son. And it wasn't going to work for their family. So in the end, that was the best result for them, and the dog's very happy, and that was the right choice. So sometimes when you are integrating families, it is an option that has to be considered. And sometimes it is the
mm.
right option, but not always. Um, I had another situation with, and this was a common one. It's like such a cliche of a dog and cat. Okay, so so I always say, like, long before I was a people mediator, I've been mediating between animals for a million years. I love it's like my favorite thing to integrate and to mediate between dogs and cats because they really often can get along with each other if you are patient enough about the introduction. So, similar story. There was no children involved in this, but it was a man and a woman, and they were moving in with each other. And she had two cats, and he had two dogs. And oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? They both love their animals. They were both absolutely committed, wonderful pet owners, and they really, really wanted to uh, live together. And they both were committed to keeping their animals. And this situation, everybody stayed together. It all worked. But because he was moving into her home where the cats were used to living, it just required a lot of um, flexibility on the part of the cat mom in this story, let's call her, because to integrate dogs and cats, you have to. I mean, I won't explain the whole process now because it's quite a long process. But the cats had to be contained in a room for quite a long time to sort of calm down and accept the two dogs in the household. The dogs had to calm down, and that integration took almost 2 months before there was peace in the home. But there is, and they're all fine with each other. And that's a nice example too of how when you're integrating very um, either different characters of dogs or different species, it can take months sometimes. It's not something you can, snap your fingers or shout or use the right treat and it'll be fine in an hour. It doesn't work like that. It can take
Mhm.
weeks and months. But if you do it the right way, it usually is resolvable. And then even if it's not, you've tried, absolutely everything that you can to do it right. And those are really satisfying. Um, I still get pictures of the dog and the cat snuggled up with each other with like a little amazed faces like, wow, it's really worked. Um, and oh, and here's another one. Okay, I've got another sweet story. So this was this I think I'm gonna get invited to this wedding. So this was a woman who had um she had a son. I think he was about 8, and they had a little dog. And their little dog was a very anxious little soul. It had been a dog that was rescued from um like a puppy mill kind of vibe, really,
Mm.
really bad backstory. This dog, he was a little poodle doodle mix, kind of one of those small fluffy dogs, small-ish. And he was very, very aggressive to strangers. And but they'd manage it because he wasn't a very big dog. So the mom and the son managed this dog, and he was fine. And then she gets into a serious relationship, and we have the boyfriend who's going to move into the house. And this dog wanted to kill him. Okay. And you can imagine, a 12-pound dog trying to kill you, but still, it's not pleasant. It's intense. It's not nice. Um, this poor little, he was so uneasy around new people. And it was just a cliche where if he tried to hug his girlfriend or touch her at all. But the worst, I mean, I made them show me, I said, okay, guys, go stand in the kitchen, give each other a hug. And the dog just flew at him. It's like he couldn't touch this
Oh.
woman. And we worked with this so quietly and so consistently, and they they're now engaged. They said that it proved to them that they had the capacity. Working with the dog issue proved to them that they could get through anything because they became a united front and they worked with it. And that was kind of the proof that they needed. Like, wait a minute, this guy's not going to leave when things get rough, and we can be patient and work through tough times. So that's like the best result when those kind of things happen, which it really can. It can be a wonderful um, gift to work through a challenge with a dog because I think it also bonds people together.
Mhm. I find that little dogs are the worst about, being aggressive. Having had 3 miniature dachshunds in my life, they're little Napoleon complexes, we always called them. They have to be tough because they think, they're little and yeah. Particularly those little doodly protective ones, right? Little
Yeah.
poodly. What about custody situations? Because that's a big one with blended families and step families and the dogs going back and forth. And I mean, how does that work best? And do you have any stories related to that? And also just talking about keeping the dog's mental health or cat's mental health in a good place, because that really benefits everybody as well, right?
Yeah. You definitely, if the animal's mental health is not good, that's when you see aggression or anxiety or all kinds of stuff you don't want to see, just like with people, I suppose. So the custody question is a big question. It is different for every family. People might assume that a dog, like, so let's say that a child is moving back and forth between two parents' homes. There's often an assumption that the dog should go where the child goes, but that doesn't work in each household. So you have to look at what the parents and the broader family really has to look at is what is going to work best for the dog. And I say that because even if the child wants the dog to move back and forth, for example, um, if it's not going to work for the dog's eventually going to become a very unhappy soul, and that's not good for anybody. Dogs can become really, really stressed when they're always moving between houses. So generally, my advice about sharing a dog is that people need to know from the onset it might not work. You can try it, but would you really want to put your dog in a situation where they're going to be stressed their whole life because they're kind of moving between the two houses constantly? So I like to look first at the parents' kind of physical house, the space that they live, and their reality in terms of caring for an animal. So one family I worked with a little while ago had two dogs, two smallish dogs, and there were two children in the picture. One was 3 and one was 6. Mom and dad divorced. Dad stayed in the house where the family had grown up, and mom moved to an apartment on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. Nice, beautiful, big place, very happy, but she was on the 3rd floor. The assumption was the parents didn't even really talk about it. It was sort of just as an aside, like, well, and the dogs will just go with the children. And when once mom moved in, the penny dropped for her that, wait a minute, she didn't have a yard. She didn't have any place for the dogs to go to the toilet, to pee.
Mm.
And her children were too young to be left in the apartment by themselves. So what this would have meant for her was that every time the dogs needed to go outside, she was going to have to bundle up 2 small kids, get them in the stroller, get the dogs on their leashes, go down in the elevator, take the dogs outside. And it was just completely unsustainable just from that simple reality of like, well, you can't manage that with 2 little kids. It'd be different if you had 15-year-old kids who could stay at home, but not with a 3 and a 6-year-old.
Mhm.
And so the mom was very upset. The challenge with one of the many challenges, there's lots of challenges with pet custody issues, but the sense of when I say loss, I mean like some people really see it as like a battle they lose if they don't keep the dog. It's like, this sort of current of, well, you took everything from me, you can't take the dog also.
Mhm.
And or sometimes people want to hang on to the dogs honestly because they want to hurt their ex, whether that's a conscious thing or not. It underpins a lot of these discussions. So if it was hard for this woman because she did not want her ex to feel like he'd won, and that's what the dogs kind of represented to her because she really loved them. But in the end, we decided it really wasn't going to work for the dog. So he kept the dogs, and she ended up getting a cat. And so the kid
Mhm.
still had an animal, and she still had an animal in her home, and that was a compromise that um, it wasn't. She was not really happy about it, but she accepted it, and it was really the only option under the circumstances. So when there's kids and dogs, we need to like look at those very simple practical things. And if you have a really high energy dog, if the child's at school all day, is the parent going to have the time to exercise it and keep it busy? um, or if the dog has any medical issues, you don't want to overstress it out and making it move between houses. So you need to ask those really practical questions. And if it doesn't work, if one of the houses is really not suitable, whether because of the schedule of the parent or because of the physical place the house is or because of the character of the dog, then it might need to stay with one of the two parents, and the whole family system would need to accept this because sometimes that's just the way that it is. If the family if it's working for the dog to move back and forth with the child, like let's say you've got a dog who's really bonded with the child really bonded with the dog, they're like glued together at the hip, two peas in a pod. If the dog is going with the child, my best tip for people is as soon as the child arrives at the other parent's home, is immediately to go for a walk. So rather than going inside and, grabbing something to eat, if you've got a teenager like I do, and that's all they do. Um, for the dog, the best way to reorient in a space is to go for a 15-minute walk around the neighborhood, let the dog smell everything, pee all over the place, get a sense of what's been happening, and then go into the house is a simple but very, very effective way to make the transition a better one. I think it
Mhm.
can help kids also if you have kids who they themselves or maybe, the transitions can be challenging as we know. And even if it can be like a lot of the families I work with get into a nice ritual where the child and the parent go for a walk and they talk and they kind of move their bodies together um, and that seems to help something rather than child coming inside going into their bedroom, for example. So that's a really helpful uh, thing that everyone can try.
Well, I'm just envisioning everything you're saying, and I'm thinking about what if you have 2 families, a couple that's split and they've remarried, and now they have new pets in their life, and then you've got the original pet from that first couple going back and forth to places that have new pets in them as well. I mean, that's gotta be really stressful on that dog, or I suppose cat, if the
Yeah.
cat goes.
Yeah.
Um,
It
yeah,
can be
there's
it can be very stressful, and I think one of the most stressful things people could think about is if you have a really big age difference in dogs. So, for example, if you have like a sweet 12-year-old dog that you got as a puppy and now your child is 12. I'm making this example up, but if there's a much older dog in the picture, and then often what one parent might do is want to get a puppy for the child. I think sometimes to make the child feel better, or, there's a lot of reasons why people get puppies, but um, it kind of symbolizes a fresh start sometimes. It's a way to, it can be a way to bring joy into the household.
Mhm.
You need to think how that's gonna impact on a much older dog because especially if the puppy's bigger than the older dog, like if you have a little old miniature Dachshund, like you said, and then you get a Labrador puppy, let's say, which is gonna be bigger and bouncier and wanna play with it. Those kind of things can result in, little dogs getting their snappy reputation just because they don't wanna be stepped on. It's like, of course, they're gonna snap at the puppy. So those kind of things would need management, like, possible gates in the house so that the older dog has a safe refuge, so that it won't be accosted by the puppy all the time. Let's say that they can sleep. Yeah. So that's something also to bear in mind.
And I don't know if you have experience because I'm kind of flipping the table here, but I'm also thinking about how to manage children that where the dog stays behind at, say, their mom's house, and then they're going to their dad's house, and they have to leave the dog for a period of time, especially if possibly the parents don't live in the same state and they're going for a period of time. How and I know you're not a child psychologist, you're a dog behaviorist, but do you have any thoughts on how to manage that also for the pets where they've got somebody leaving and then reintegrating, or how to help the children that are having to separate from their pets for periods of time? Do you have any thoughts on that or experience with that?
So from the pet side, the way that will make those kind of transitions the easiest is if there isn't a huge contrast between what happens when the child's there and what happens when the child is gone. In other words, let's say the child is a, spends, I'm going to make this up, spends many hours every day at the dog park after school, or takes the dogs on long runs, or does a lot of activity with the dog. And then when that child leaves, the parent doesn't do any of those things. That would make it harder on the dog than
Mm,
if the basic activity level is the same. So that's a good conversation that parents should have with their kids, is like, what's going to be sustainable so that this dog more or less gets the same amount of activity a day. Similarly, things like, let's say the child wants the dog to sleep in their bed, and that's great. But if the mom or the dad won't allow that, that's also quite a harder for the dog. So in
mm,
that instance, it would be kinder for the dog if the child didn't let it sleep in their bed, but maybe just sleep next to their bed. Just specifically because then the dog, will have a hard, because the dog's used to having dogs love sleeping with other things, whether it's people or other dogs. Generally, they do. So that absence would also make the child being gone more difficult.
mm,
Um, and I think with children, from my experience working with children, it's quite age dependent. If the child is older and they can really understand, um, that the dog is okay without them, and that it's easier on the dog to stay in one house than to move to a house where it won't work for them to be there. They can usually get their head around that. For little kids, it's really tricky. So some families I work with, will each parent will get a pet, and maybe it's not the same species. Maybe maybe one family parent prefers cats to dogs, or some other, even a smaller animal that a hamster or something that is in the house but isn't as labor intensive as a dog might be. Although hamsters can be very labor intensive. I've had lots. But that is a way to, uh, for some children, to cushion the kind of loss of that animal presence in their life. If the parent really does not want animals, however, I want to give parents listening permission that you shouldn't get a dog or a cat just because your child wants it. If it really doesn't work for you, you need to, kind of do some self-reflection, understand why, what's going on for you, but it has to work for the adult in the house too. It really, really does. Otherwise, everybody including the animal, becomes very stressed from what's happening. My interesting story is that I wasn't allowed dogs when I was growing up. And I think I said dog before I said mom. Dog was like one of my first words. I was so obsessed with dogs, it's like my earliest memory. But because I wasn't allowed dogs, and I wasn't allowed dogs because my parents didn't want them. And they were sure that if they gave me a dog when I was a little kid, they would end up taking care of it. So they were just very clear. I had lots of other pets, but not a dog. And from that, I started a dog walking business when I was 10. This was, of course, pre-internet days, so I was still at the library. I read every single book about dogs in my local library multiple times. I knew about every single breed of dog. I was so passionate about it, and the lack of them it really guided me into the career I do, because I volunteered at the animal shelter. And so it wasn't a bad thing for me, even though at the time it felt like it was. So you can also offer things to kids like, could they volunteer at an animal shelter if they're older in their local area, so that they have some dog company, let's say, or could they start a dog walking business, or is there possibly some other way that they can enjoy animals, but that isn't necessarily for the parents. And parents need to know this, because, okay, so here's another story. This is, I can whip out a million stories. So this mother was a single mom, and she had three teenage children. Dad was out of the picture. He was not in their life anymore. And so this mom was really doing her best. She was working full time and parenting three teenagers, which is not easy with two parents. It's certainly not easy with one. Her son when she contacted me, I think he was 15 or 16, but he was one of those kids who was spending most of his time in his room with the door closed, and she just couldn't engage with him. He wasn't going outside very much. And then one day he arrived and said, I want to get a puppy and I want to get a Belgian Malinois. And so for listeners who don't know, if you
Yeah.
don't know, just quickly do a Google search on a Belgian
Yeah.
Malinois. They are an incredibly intense working breed dog. These are military dogs. They're the kind of dogs who, sniff for bombs and find people lost in avalanches. And they're really, really, really great dogs if you need a military soldier dog.
And they're
Um,
big,
they're big and they are one of the most, if not
strong.
strong, high energy um, dogs. And they're incredible in the right context and they're awful in the wrong context. So this mother, bless her heart, decided she was so desperate to connect with her son. She said, "Great, let's get a puppy." She told me later she thought it'd be a project. She thought it'd be something they could do together, and she was just trying her best. She was trying to find some way to connect with her son, and this was the first time he'd expressed any desire for something, that he'd sort of verbalized something that would make him happy. So they get a Belgian Malinois puppy, and I met them because they came to puppy school. So this is how I met this family. This was when I was teaching, had a very busy dog training school, and they came to puppy school and they came every week and the puppy was cute. It was the best puppy in class because they're so smart and they're so intense, which was great when he was 3 months old. And then they kept coming to class. And when he hit about 6 or 7 months old, this is what we call the velociraptor stage of Malinois puppies. When suddenly, wait a minute, he's 25 pounds and he's really strong and he bites a lot. And honest and the long and the short of it was, he became overwhelming for the son. The son stopped bringing him to training. Mom started bringing him to training, and the puppy did not accomplish what they'd wanted, which was for the son to find some joy and activity in his life. And this dog, we also, like the other dog I mentioned, had to find a new home for because it was a completely inappropriate dog for the household. The breeder, in my opinion, was totally irresponsible to give them this dog. We could have a whole other podcast about those kind of situations. But it wasn't sustainable. There was no way this family could manage this dog with her working full time and the kids in school. So he found a great home with someone else who knew the breed and was capable of, and he's a very happy dog. I still see him today. He's a happy boy. But a dog wasn't right for them. So you don't want to give in to your children's desire for a dog without being very thoughtful, because it's much worse to get the wrong dog and then have to make a horrible, hard decision. So it's better to be, you know, stick with your guns, research, make smart decisions, and look for compromise. So this family, I mean, he wanted him, if only they'd talked to me before they got the puppy, I could have said, let's get a different breed. Let's get a less intense dog. Let's get a calmer, sweet, friendly dog that doesn't need a military operation every day to be happy. Um, yeah.
I I'm s God, I'm having so many memories run through my mind of all the mistakes and all the different things that I've done in my life, starting with, as you said, that stepmother who said I couldn't have a dog, and I was so driven to have different dogs, and I've had so many different dogs, and I we are coming toward the end of the interview, but, um I guess one thing that pops into my mind is when you rescue a dog, and that happened to me. I rescued a dog, and the dog turned out to be a difficult breed. It seemed different as a puppy, and it was a mix of a Dalmatian and a black Cocker Spaniel, and it looked like a little black lab puppy. And then it turned out to be a little crazy, and it bit my child, and it bit the neighbor child. And I had to also go through this. I had to give him to my vet, who took him to his farm, and a whole thing. But it was so difficult to give this dog up. But it was biting people, children, and drawing blood. And so, what about real quickly when people adopt dogs, they don't really know what they're getting, and obviously, it's so important to rescue dogs. But you don't know what you're getting when you have a family. Do you have any suggestions on that or thoughts?
So try get help as soon as possible. So when I say help, I just mean, get a trainer in the picture, get thoughtful advice about which dogs to adopt, because often rescue centers do have like good suggestions about which dogs would be better suited for a family. Even if you have your eye, even if a different dog catches your eye, it isn't always the right one. So take advice from people. Um, and yeah, rescue dogs are generally great. There's just a few that don't. And it's the same with purebred dogs. Most purebred dogs are
Yeah.
great. And then occasionally you get the tricky ones. So my best advice is take advice from the people who know the dogs. Do your research. Don't rush into a decision, and don't rush to get to rescue a dog that you really feel sorry for. Rush to look for a dog that is a good fit. Just because because loving a dog won't necessarily make it a balanced, happy dog. So it can be tricky because we often see these really sad posts of really, dogs who've been through a really, really rough time. Don't let that necessarily pull you into rescuing it. You need to make sure that when that dog is healthy, that it's the right breed and the right size to fit your family.
That's great advice. And I just want to thank you, Karis, so much for being here today. Karis is so in demand. You told me that you set up your day to speak to people in different times in South Africa, in Australia, in the US, in the UK. You are in high demand. And so your advice is really, really well taken. And I'm grateful for this. I love this subject. Really is something so important that doesn't get talked about a lot. So we're going to put Karis's information in our show notes. Please buy her book. I will say it again. Will you please say the name again? Who Keeps the Dog?
Yeah.
The full
Yes,
name?
the book is called Who Keeps the Dog? Navigating Pet Custody During Divorce. It's a very helpful whether you're divorced or just going through a breakup, or if you're a lawyer listening to this or a mediator. It's a wonderful guidebook to help people make smart decisions, sustainable decisions for their animals when you're going through a breakup. Yeah.
And do you have any final bits of wisdom that we didn't talk about today that you'd love to share? I know you have a lot of wisdom.
I know. I have a lot of wisdom. I'm just trying to think what the best thing is. So here's my advice. Never take your dog's behavior personally. Assume that it is not done for any intention other than the dog's needs aren't being met, or the dog is confused about what the expectation are, or what the expectation from you is. Dogs never behave in such a way to be malicious or to get back at us about things, but they do express their stress and frustration in ways that we generally don't like. Get professional help if you need it. Don't be shy to reach out for help. And when all else fails, take your dog for a walk.
Excellent. Great way to end. Thank you so much again, Karis. I'd love to have you on another time just because there's just endless talk on this subject. Here's Luna to end the program, right, Luna? She's whining to go outside. She's been quiet long enough. All right. We will see you next week for another episode of Step Stories. And please remember to share the podcast and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you again. Bye-bye, Karis.
Bye.